Hi, this is Mr. Hubbard, and I'm going to walk everybody through the editor project. And this is going to be a couple of videos here, so they'll probably be labeled as Editor 1, Editor 2, Editor 3. Just pointing out some of the major points involved in making a text editor that we're going to have to do. Once we get started with it, you'll find out that it's a straightforward project. You've got to get a little clever in some cases, but if you understand what we talked about with strings, you should be able to do this without too much problem. So let me start. I have, this is what you have, the student version. I just copied that whole folder, and I've got this Editor 2017 video. Double click on that, and then I'll double click on the package file. Now, in class, some people were having issues with some of these files, and if you just right click on a file and then open it with Notepad, I just did that way, but if you open it with Notepad and then close it, then when you double click on the package in BlueJ, it should show up. So here's our package. It's got this file here that I'll talk about in a second, this editor, and this editor, and this editor panel, and this editor panel. So let's start with this file here, because this is really the key to the whole thing. This is an interface. You'll notice it starts off by saying Public Interface Ed. All of our editors are going to be extensions of this. What an interface is this is telling the whole world, this is what you're going to find in one of these classes. So we're going to find a get before and a get after method. We're going to have a get right arrow and a left arrow. We're going to have a delete, a backspace, an insert string, a home key, and an end key. These are the basic functions you need in order to make a working text editor. We also have this one here called toString. I'll briefly talk about that when we get there. So that's our interface. What we need to do if we're going to be saying that this is a text editor, first of all, everything else is not going to be talking to either of these classes. Instead, everything that's going to be working with this is going to talk to this editor. I'll kind of show you that here, right here, this editor panel. Okay, this is something that's going to be talking to the editor. And essentially what we're going to do is this is what's going to capture like all our keystrokes and that kind of stuff, and it's going to send those keystrokes into here. And if something happens, it's going to call one of these methods, depending on which one it hits. So, for example, here is key pressed key event, and ed is equal to editor.left arrow. So, right here, private ed. So this is saying private ed editor. So this is essentially going back to this ed class and saying, we're going to have this thing that we call the editor. This thing doesn't know whether it's going to get its editor from editor 1 or editor 2, nor does it care. It really doesn't care. So on this particular situation, we're going to get this thing, we're going to have this editor, and it's always going to talk to this ed interface. So depending on what we have, if the key code is left arrow, it's going to call the left arrow method of our editor object. Right arrow method of the editor object. Home key method of the editor object. And so on and so on. So, when it's all done, it's going to get a new editor, ed equals editor.insertString, and we're going to set the main editor that this thing is dealing with to the returned editor that these things are going to return. Then it's going to repaint the screen. So every time we touch a key, it's going to repaint the screen. All of the rest of this stuff, go ahead and take a look at. This is how we make a graphical user interface using Java. And it might seem like a lot of typing, but when you get right down to it, it's not much at all. I remember my first Windows program that I typed in was about 80 lines of code, and I thought that was wonderful, especially since the one I had not typed in, but I'd seen before that, was thousands of lines of code. So every time we come around, these things get shorter and shorter. If you really want short, get Visual Basic. and you don't even type in any of the code. You just make a new Visual Basic program. And yeah, there is stuff behind the scenes that you don't see, but you really don't do anything. You just make the new program. So, getting back to this, I want to go for a couple more, I want to do a couple more things here, and then we'll end the video. So, let's just give you a big picture look at what's going on in Editor 1 and Editor 2. This is the guts of the program. And for this assignment, for this lab, I want you to finish either Editor 1 or Editor 2. Now, if you find the one that you pick so easy that it wasn't any challenge at all, finish it up and then go to the other one and do that. But I expect most people to do one or the other. So here's Editor 1, just going in numerical order. One thing to understand, if you ever take a look at a text file using some kind of editor that doesn't try to format what you're looking at, what you will find is actually a long string of text. Let me just open up Notepad real fast. Notepad. So what you might find is letters of the alphabet that are typed in, and these are the words that they typed. And then you might find a special character, and I'm just going to use these angled brackets to say that this is a special character, but it might say something like LF and CR and tab. And, oh, what are some other things that you might see on there? PR, or PF, I'm sorry. These are characters. A line feed will essentially cause the text editor to go down one line. So it'll go down from this line down to that line. Carriage return will then tell it to go over here. Tab usually tells it to go over 5 spaces. So if I press the tab key here, it actually inserts a set of 5 spaces. If I press it again, another set. Well, it's not actually inserting the set. It's just the tab key. If I hit the backspace key and delete it, it deletes all of that space there. Page feed will actually skip, we'll put in a new page. So if you're ever printing something out on a printer, you'll see the entire page get kicked out after that particular character. There's other non-printing characters that have special meanings, especially when you get into a program like Microsoft Word, where you have all these formatting commands and all sorts of other commands that are going to be put into the file that are part of this big, long string of characters. So your file really isn't this rectangular screen of information. It's one big, long string of stuff, and it's up to the program to interpret what that big, long string of stuff is. In our case, our editor will understand how to wrap text around a screen and stuff, but we still want to understand that it is one big, long string. So Editor 1 is going to be solving this problem by treating our big, long string as actually 2 strings, a pre and a post. Pre and post what? Oh, see where I've clicked there? You see the vertical line where I've clicked? That's the cursor. So pre and post are pre and post cursor. So what this is doing is it's storing all of our text in 2 strings. All the stuff before the cursor and all the stuff after the cursor. If you go to Editor 2, it's one big string. So there's the big string. But what they do in Editor 2 is they have a number. And that number is going to hold where our cursor is. Here they're calling it slice. As though you're saying, this is where you slice the string in 2. So all of the methods in here will presume that it's one big long string and we're doing stuff at the location that we indicate by the slice. Editor 1 is 2 strings, and everything is going to happen somewhere between the pre and the post strings. So that's my first introduction, and I'm going to get into a little bit more detail and send you on your way in the next video.